Today in Southside Pittsburgh, Coach Tomlin took the podium for the Pittsburgh Steelers here on Tomlin Tuesday, gave some injury updates, gave an explanation as to why Roman Wilson was benched last week for the Ravens game and more. Today we're going to be talking about a bunch of different topics here. There's been some new reporting on the job security surrounding head coach Mike Tomlin that we'll discuss at the top of today's show. Then we'll talk about the injury updates here heading into Week 15 that Tomlin gave to us at the podium earlier today. He also gave that explanation for why Roman Wilson got benched and guys like Scotty Miller retained their roster position. And then make sure you guys stay tuned to the end of today's show because the Cleveland Browns are about to make a huge mistake that is about to set their franchise back another few years when they make this mistake next offseason. Now, before we get into the content today, make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. We provide you guys daily and free informative Steelers content here on the channel every single day. We have shorts, we have community posts. We've, of course, got 2 full-length videos on this channel every single day, as well as our breaking news coverage that we have during the offseason. Whenever Omar Khan makes a big signing, we make sure to get you guys breaking news coverage for free as fast as we can. We got weekly live show coverage as well. We go live on Tuesdays and Thursdays as well as every single Steelers game day, and it's all 100% free, guys. So if you enjoy our content here, you've been watching us for a while, and you want to join our family, there's a reason why we are the only individually run Steelers news program with over 100,000 subscribers. So help us continue to grow our family here today by clicking that subscribe button and supporting the channel. Now, we get into this report here at the top of today's show from NFL Network's Ian Rappaport. This actually came out before the game on Sunday, indicating that Mike Tomlin is quote-unquote not, Mike Tomlin firing in Pittsburgh this year is quote-unquote not going to happen, especially after this last big-time win versus the Baltimore Ravens in Week 14. This is what Rappaport had to say in his most recent reporting surrounding Coach T. A Mike Tomlin firing is not going to happen. The Steelers know that Tomlin is one of the NFL's best coaches, and his relationship with Art Rooney and the organization he's coached since 2007 is such that a firing is not on the table. Last June, set to enter the final year of his contract, Tomlin signed a 3-year extension that secured the future of one of the NFL's highest paid coaches. That deal, however, contains a team option that must be picked up by March 1st of next offseason to lock in that 2027 season. If not, Tomlin would enter the 2026 season in a contract year, which would be noteworthy given his stature. That's why it's likely the team would pick the option up, sources say. As one source said, if the Steelers win versus the Ravens in Week 14, this all goes away. So it certainly sounds like Mike Tomlin's going to be returning as the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2026, whether some Steelers fans like that or not. And, I think, we can look back to what Art Rooney had to say about head coach Mike Tomlin last offseason and why they've continued to keep him as long as they have. It's very clear that Art believes that Tomlin is one of the best head coaches in the National Football League. This is what he had to say about Tomlin at the league meetings back in January. When you look at how many games Mike has won in this league, you don't win that many games if you're not a good coach. And I know he's frustrated like we all are in terms of not being able to take that next step, but we still feel good about him being the leader and still think he has the strengths that he always had in terms of being able to lead a team. The other side of the coin is when you look at the fact that we have 6, 7, 8 teams a year that turn their coaches over. When you have a good coach, you just try and keep building with them. So from Art Rooney's perspective, Mike Tomlin is one of the better head coaches in the National Football League, and from his perspective, when you have one of those really good coaches, even if you don't have exceptional seasons, you still try and build with that head coach if you still believe in him. And I would say the devil's advocate's kind of view there is that I think it's fair to say it's fair to criticize Tomlin even if you think he's a good head coach. And I think he's certainly a good head coach. You can't have this many non-losing seasons in a row without being a good head coach. But I think that there are legitimate questions as to whether or not he's an exceptional head coach, like an Andy Reid or Sean McVay or one of these really, really top-end coaches in the league that consistently get their teams into Super Bowl contention. And, if Mike Tomlin's not one of those exceptional head coaches, why are we just settling for only good, right? Why are we just settling for mediocrity? Why are we just settling for 9-8, 10-7 with no playoff victories every single season? And I think Art probably doesn't have a firm grasp of Mike Tomlin's role in that mediocrity. He's not picking the right quarterbacks. He's not picking the right offensive coordinators. Mike Tomlin has a big say in some of these veterans they bring in free agency that are completely cooked, all right, that are like in their 30s and they're completely done. Just look at Darius Slay this season, Patrick Peterson a couple of years ago, Allen Robinson a couple of years ago. They bring in all these older players that don't work out. Mike Tomlin has a very heavy hand in team building in that regard, and it's led to a lot of mediocrity here in Pittsburgh. But at this point, it certainly appears, based on the reporting from guys like Schefter and Rappaport, all these different guys, they all say Mike Tomlin is coming back in 2026. So at least for the time being, barring some sort of catastrophic disaster to finish the season, like losing 4 in a row and losing the division, like I feel like Mike Tomlin is almost certainly going to be back with the Pittsburgh Steelers next year. But I think something that's possible is that if the Steelers kind of crap the bed down the stretch here and they lose out on the playoffs, then Pittsburgh may decide to decline Mike Tomlin's option for 2027 and make him a lame duck head coach heading into the 2026 campaign, where he would be fighting for a new contract. And, I think the only way that Tomlin actually ends up leaving the organization heading into next offseason is if he decides to do so. If he decides, I'm done with this organization, I'm done with this fan base, I want to go somewhere where I'm appreciated, or whatever the case may be, he wants a fresh start, whatever. I think that's the only way that the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin are not doing business together in 2026. And personally, guys, I just don't see Coach T doing that. His family is rooted here. His wife has many businesses, with her clothing line and stuff like that in Pittsburgh. It's all rooted in this city, and I just don't see him wanting to uproot his life. And he loves it here in Pittsburgh. He absolutely loves the job that he has, and he loves the players that he gets to coach, and especially with Cam Hayward likely to have just one more season in his NFL career, I guarantee you Mike Tomlin wants to be a part of that season. So I just don't see Coach T wanting to move on. But even despite the big win versus the Baltimore Ravens, there are some Steelers fans, like former defensive player of the year for this organization, big-time voice, and honestly awesome podcaster, by the way now, James Harrison, where he said earlier this week that a Super Bowl championship should be the only thing that saves Mike Tomlin's job this season. All right, this is what James had to say on his podcast this week. He says, quote, I think Mike Tomlin did a better job because he won this week. The only thing that would 100% keep him with me if I'm in the owner's hat is I need a chip, because I look at this game and I see that we still gave up 217 yards rushing. If you win it all, I don't care what your numbers are, because you found a way to win the chip. But if you don't, then I have to look at it in terms of what it is, and that's numbers. Even if we go to an AFC championship game and we lose it, are you telling me we get there, we lost it, and now does that give you another 8 years of not winning one? No. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Now, respectfully to James Harrison, man, he's one of my favorite Steelers of all time, one of my favorite football players of all time, and he's a fantastic podcaster and all that different stuff. I think he has a really good way with words as well. I just think he's taking this take way too far, because if we're going by the logic here, right, if you don't win a Super Bowl with a head coach, like, you got to fire him. And it's like, no, like there are certain things where like a team has certain expectations heading into the year, and they have to meet a certain bar for it to kind of meet expectations. And I think for the Pittsburgh Steelers, if they make the playoffs this year, and especially if they win a playoff game this year, there's just no way in hell that Mike Tomlin is going to get fired. In fact, I don't see really any scenario where Mike Tomlin gets fired at this point in time. But like, if Mike Tomlin gets this team to win a playoff game this year, or maybe multiple playoff games this year, absolutely, he should be back with this team in 2026. All right, I don't think we're at the point here where you have to be the lone team standing at the end of the season in order to save your job. I don't think it's even close to that point at this point in time. And it's like, really, James, if we make it to the AFC Championship game, we win multiple playoff games in order to get there, which is what it would take to get to an AFC Championship game this year. You're firing Mike Tomlin if we lose that game? Like, are we actually serious with that take? I think that takes it a little bit too far. I don't agree with it, and I do think that if this team makes the playoffs, Mike Tomlin should for sure be back as this team's head coach in in 2026. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. How far does Pittsburgh have to go in the postseason this year for Mike Tomlin to be safe, at least in your opinion? Type those. Let me know down there in the comment section. Is it the wild card round? Is it to win a playoff game and get to the divisional round? Does he have to make the AFC Championship game? Does he have to make a Super Bowl? Does he have to win the Super Bowl like James Harrison says? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. This will be the pinned comment on today's show. In just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Harry's. And while I tell you about our sponsor today, let me know how far the Steelers have to go this year for you to want to keep Mike Tomlin at head coach. All right, now before we get to the rest of today's show, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Harry's. And I don't have to tell you guys that maneuvering the men's razor space nowadays absolutely sucks. You know, the quality products are always super expensive in today's economy, and refills are always ridiculously expensive as well. And then when you try and save a little bit of money, you get stuck with dull razors that irritate your skin and even cut your skin at times. That's exactly why I switched to Harry's Plus, and I haven't looked back since. Harry's Plus has an advanced pivoting system to reach every corner of your face, refined blade tech for a closer, smoother shave, and a weighted metal handle, which is Harry's heaviest handle ever for added control and comfort. But I think the best part about Harry's Plus is how affordable it is. Harry's owns their own world-class blade factory in Germany, which means no outsourcing and no middlemen. And because they control the entire process from steel to shelf, they keep costs low and pass the savings on to you. And even after all this innovation that they've put into Harry's Plus, Harry's still costs less than Gillette Fusion. And to put a bow on it all, if you don't love your shave with Harry's Plus, Harry's is going to make it right with you, no questions asked. Their risk-free trial means there's zero downside to giving them a shot. And just to show you guys that I love and actually use Harry's Plus, I brought my Harry's Plus razor with me here today. I use their whole line of shaving products as well. I love their post-shave balm. I also really like their shaving gel. It smells terrific, and it's really affordable. And, you know, the reason why I started using Harry's all the way back in college is because obviously being a broke college kid, I didn't have any money. But once I switched to Harry's, you got the German-engineered craftsmanship of their blades, which is fantastic. You can, it doesn't irritate your skin as much, and, you know, it's absolutely fantastic stuff, but you don't have to break the bank to get that barbershop quality shave. So for a limited time only, our listeners can get the Harry's Plus trial set for only $10 at harrys.com/chat. This set includes the all-new Harry's Plus razor, one refined 5-blade cartridge, a 2-ounce foaming shave gel, and a travel cover to protect your blades on the go. Just head on over to harrys.com/chat to claim this offer, and after your purchase, they'll ask where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. A big thank you to Harry's for sponsoring today's edition of Steelers Talk. Now, some injury updates here from Mike Tomlin at the podium today in Southside Pittsburgh. DK Metcalf dealt with some stomach issues in Baltimore after the game on Sunday, but he's expected to play on Monday versus the Miami Dolphins. And then Kyle Duggar, who missed last week's game against the Ravens with a hand injury, is also expected to be back in the lineup this week against Miami. Now, in terms of the DK Metcalf thing here, it was definitely a little bit weird because, you know, he plays the entire game and all this different stuff, but then he had to stay in Baltimore on Sunday overnight in a hospital to get looked at because he was having some real big discomfort with his stomach, and apparently everything's okay. He's in Pittsburgh now, and, you know, he's recovering from that and whatever it was. And Mike Tomlin did say today that he is expected to play on Monday night. So just keep that in mind. Obviously, our thoughts and prayers go out to DK. Hopefully everything's going to be okay with him there. Obviously, whenever, you know, your star wide receiver that just put up over 140 yards through the air has to spend the night in the hospital there before coming back to Pittsburgh, that's not ideal. But the good news is he is expected back in the lineup here, according to Ian Rappaport and Mike Tomlin. Then moving on here to the questionables for the Pittsburgh Steelers heading into this week's matchup versus the Miami Dolphins. And, you know, there's multiple players still in concussion protocol. All those guys will be questionable. That includes Darnell Washington, Malik Harrison, and Andrew Peat. Obviously, I think we really, really hope that all three of those guys can play because Darnell's a big body. You know, he's going to be, you know, if he's out there on Monday, I guarantee you there's not going to be a single Miami Dolphin that wants to tackle that guy. Then Malik Harrison, you know, the run defense portion of the defense and the defensive effort in this game going up against Devon Achane, it's going to be huge. I think Harrison can play a big part on defense this week. And then Andrew Peat, obviously, I think is an upgrade over you know, Dylan Cook, who had to play the second half of yesterday's game. or 2 days ago against the Baltimore Ravens. But Calvin Anderson, one of the options at offensive tackle, unfortunately, he has suffered a knee injury, and he is out this week. Now, he suffered it last week, but he will be out, so he will not be an option. And because Broderick Jones is already out with his neck injury, that means that if Andrews Pete can't clear concussion protocol this week, that it's going to be Dylan Cook who's going to be getting the start at left tackle if Pete can't give it a go. That Cook held up decently there in the second half when he was asked to come in and play for that final stretch. He didn't give up any pressures or anything like that. He did just fine at left tackle, but a full game against Bradley Chubb and Chop Robinson might change the tune a little bit there. So hopefully Andrews Pete is going to be able to go so you can have as many hands on deck as possible on the offensive line. But then we also got an answer today from head coach Mike Tomlin as to why the second-year wide receiver out of Michigan, Roman Wilson, was benched and was not given a helmet and was a healthy inactive for Sunday's game versus the Baltimore Ravens. And the answer is just that Scotty Miller has the capability apparently to be a backup punt returner in the situation where Calvin Austin III would potentially get injured. And apparently they don't trust Roman Wilson to play that role enough, but I still think that this isn't an answer that fits the bill for me, guys. I would still give Roman that helmet over Scotty Miller because I do think Roman showed some good things and showed some growth as the season went on. He's still, to this day, one of the most efficient receivers that the Steelers have on the team just by the numbers. And, he was stacking corners on go balls multiple times in the weeks before he got benched here. And, I would rather see him get a roster spot than a guy like Scotty Miller. Are we really saying there's nobody else other than Calvin Austin III and Scotty Miller that can return punts in the event that Calvin gets injured? Give me a break, man. Do we really need Scotty Miller to be a backup punt returner that bad where we're going to bench a somewhat promising, former third-round pick that we drafted last year and completely ruin his confidence? I just disagree with this decision wholeheartely. And I'm sure Scotty, is a great backup punt returner, but I would rather see Roman Wilson get that helmet on game days. But, I think the likely reality at this point is that Aaron Rodgers and, this Steelers coaching staff just doesn't feel like they can trust Roman Wilson as a starting level wide receiver. And what I mean by that is that there are certain, especially in this offense where there's a lot of, option routes and the wide receivers have a lot of freedom to run routes in a certain way based on the coverage that they get. I don't think Roman Wilson was running those routes correctly all the time. He was not running what I like to call QB-friendly routes at times where, you run your route at a certain angle to make it easier for the quarterback to hit you in stride. For example, if you're running a dig route and, you're kind of tailing that thing off, it's going to make it easier for the cornerback to undercut it and intercept it. Whereas if you kind of go on an inward angle, it makes it easier for the quarterback to hit you, and it doesn't give that cornerback an opportunity to come poach it. Those little details are the things I think sometimes fans miss and they don't really understand. But those are some of the things that Roman Wilson is still very much developing in his game, and that's exactly why they go out and get an Adam Thielen who knows those details and knows exactly how to run each and every route that this offense is going to ask him to run, whereas Roman is still learning those little intricacies and those nuances of the position at this point, even though, he did show, I think quite a bit of promise here in Pittsburgh. I hope that he is not done here in Pittsburgh. I hope he still has a future with his football team because, he does have some talent here, and I'm hoping that he can develop in the years to come. But I would say until, there's a potential injury in this wide receiver room, I don't expect Roman Wilson to get a helmet for the rest of this season. So predict it for me down there in the comments section. Will Roman Wilson be a Steeler next season, or will they let him go in some capacity this upcoming offseason? Give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section. My answer to this question, guys, is I hope so. I hope the Steelers aren't completely done with Roman Wilson because I still think that there is some potential there for this to be a contributor on offense down the stretch and in future years for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I hope they're not done with him, but after not giving him a helmet, it's hard to feel like there's a future for Roman Wilson here in Pittsburgh. Now, before I say goodbye for today's edition of Steelers News and Rumors, I think the Cleveland Browns are about to make a huge mistake, guys. It was reported last weekend that the Cleveland Browns are likely to give Deshaun Watson a chance to be their starting quarterback in 2026. Now, it appears likely that Cleveland is not just going to hand Deshaun Watson the job. He's been arguably the worst starting quarterback in the league the 2 seasons prior to this one, where, of course, he's missed the entire year after tearing his Achilles not once but twice last year. It's just ridiculous report here from Ian Rappaport saying the Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson is not expected to be a starter this season for Cleveland, but there's a good chance he's on the roster next season with an opportunity to be the starter. So I think we are very rapidly approaching a Shedeur Sanders versus Deshaun Watson quarterback battle in Cleveland next year. And for me, guys, that's the best case scenario as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, because I think Deshaun Watson is absolutely terrible, and I think Shedeur Sanders, even though he's done some decent things, over the last few weeks, he had a pretty good game against a terrible Titans defense last week. But the more that Cleveland feels like Shedeur is a viable starting option for them in future years, that's the good news for the Pittsburgh Steelers and their fans, because that would just be one other team that won't be taking a quarterback in round 1 of the 2026 NFL draft. And then, in terms of the long-term prospects of Shedeur or Deshaun wreaking havoc in this division, I don't think either one of them, even has the upside to be a good starting quarterback in this league. Like, I think Shedeur's upside is like as a bottom half of the league starter. So even if he hits that upside, I don't really view him in Cleveland as a threat. And, if they're going to be passing on drafting a quarterback early in the NFL draft next year, obviously that could provide some more opportunities for Pittsburgh to trade up and get a guy of their choosing in Pittsburgh next year. In next spring. So true or false? Let me know down there in the comment section. The Browns will win the AFC North title within the next 5 years. Do the Browns win a division title in the next half decade? Type T if you think that statement is true, or type F if you think that statement is false. If history is to be believed with the Cleveland Browns, I'd be typing my F down there in the comments section. All right, that'll be it for today's edition of News and Rumors for your Pittsburgh Steelers here on Steelers Talk, here on a Tuesday, a Tomlin Tuesday. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Really do appreciate all of your guys' support. Until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.